A very good morning to all. In today's session, we are going to learn about the cartel's prisoners dilemma, individual and group equilibrium, and excess capacity. So let's begin with the cartel. So before I come up to cartel, it is very important that cartel is one of the you can say significant role plays under the collegium model. So in the oligopolistic markets or situations, organizations are always face a very high competition towards each other, which ultimately leads to price wars. So to avoid such war, it is very important for the organizations to have a formal agreement regarding or about the price output policy. Such agreement is actually called collusion. It's collusion, which is very opposite part of the competition. So under the collusion models, organizations are always involved in collaborate with each other so that they can take whatever the decisions or optimal decisions so that they can keep up the bargaining power against the customers or consumers. So cartel is actually a formal agreement between the companies or the between the organizations who always try to maintain the price and the production cost so that the price will be set up according to the requirements of the consumers as well as the businesses or markets. So cartel is an organization of independent firms whose main purpose to control and limit the production and maintain the optimal prices or increase the prices according to the situation, and of course it automatically generates the profits and revenues for that particular market. So that is called cartel. Let's talk about the benefits of cartel or collusion. So these are the main benefits you can talk about. It helps organizations to increase their performances. So if the business or market performs very well just because of the cartel, because they always try to limit and maintain the production and of course the sustain the prices or increase the prices according to the market situation, and which automatically improve or increase their performances in the market. When we talk about the second benefit, it also helps the organization in preventing uncertainties. It's very natural, you can say, or a challenging task that uncertainties is always play a significant role in the particular market, whether it would be the perfect market or it would be a monopolistic market, or we talk about the oligopoly market, and of course in the cartel as well. So it all cartels is always helps the organizations into having a formal agreements to prevent uncertainties together in a particular businesses. Next is also provides the opportunities to prevent the entry of a new organizations, as the cartel will not allow to enter the entries of a new organization. In fact, they helps or offers the opportunities when new organizations willing to come up and join the this cartel agreement. Next one is the agreement of collusion is always be in a formal in nature, which is also the one of the benefit because every work in the market will be in the formal in nature. So, whatever the formal or competitive organizations are involved in the market, a formal agreement, whichever is formed among those competitive organizations, is actually called a cartel as well. So, in other words, the cartel can be defined a group of organizations who always work together to make up the price or sustain the prices, optimum pricing policies and output decision, which always involve to maintain or limit the production and its cost. We come up to the under cartel, the price and output determination is always being done under supervision of administrative authority, which always have an aim to have an equal profit distribution among all the members and organizations under cartels. So under cartel, there is a group of organizations, and whoever the members of organization involved in the cartel, involved in the formal agreement, so whatever the profit distribution is involved, they should be equal among all of them. The total profits are also distributed on the basis of sharing as per decided or as per the agreement rules and regulations between the members organization or a competitive organization. And one of the famous example of the cartel is OPEC, Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, who are involved to share a control of the petroleum markets, who are actually involved to control the pricing of the petroleum between the competitive countries or the members organizations or of different countries were always involved under the cartel or under a formal agreement. So let us understand or learn the price and output decisions under this model with the help of a follow-up example. And we always assumes that there are two organizations which have formed a cartel. So let's begin two organizations or two firms. It could be A and B, and ultimately it reach to the industry curves. So let's begin with the explanation or the working of the cartel, which has been shown in this particular diagram. That is firm A, firm B, and industry curve, which always a combination of firm A and firm B. So when we talk about firm A, it always shows that OQ1 is always a quantity demanded, which has been measured on the x-axis, and y-axis the price or cost or revenue has been measured on the y-axis. In case of firm, the you can say the marginal cost curve cuts at its minimum point of the average cost curve, which ultimately you can see reaches the most equivalent point. But when we talk about when any of the cost line which cuts the marginal cost and the marginal cost cuts the price line, that actually call the most optimal price decision in case of firm A, that is C1. But when we talk about in case of firm B, there are two main cost curve which has been drawn, that is the marginal cost curve and average cost curve, that is MC2 and the AC2. So when we talk about the cost curve, which always cuts the marginal cost curve, and along with that, the average cost curve or the shape of the average cost curve is a U shape, which automatically cuts the cost curve and of course the price curve at its maximum point, which is called the average cost curve too. So automatically the average cost curve and the marginal cost curve cuts at the cost line, and that's called the cost a new cost equilibrium point, that is C2. Same in the case of firm A, when marginal cost curve intersect the cost curve, that particular point stands for C1, and that particular point is also called an original equilibrium point of firm A, that is OQ1 in case of firm A. But when we talk about in the case of firm B, the original you can say quantity demanded would be in firm B, that is OQ2, and the price line which always becomes a vertical, which is a combination of both the firms, firm A and B, which reaches out the price level for the industry as well. So these are the two main curves. When we combine these curves togetherly, it will reach out or convert into the industry curve that has been shown in the cartel, that both firms are engaged into a formal agreement, and when they engage into a formal agreement, their main purpose is to maintain and sustain the price level and of course limit the production. So if you look up the industry which where the combination of the two firms were engaged, where the quantity is remains the fixed and the price is always in the limit. So the quantity demanded is actually in the limited level, and the price is always remains the constant, and that is the aim of the cartel. That is the working structure of the cartel. When in case of industry, where the marginal revenue and the average revenue curves has been drawn, which is whereas the average revenue curve is equal to demand, and when the marginal cost curve intersect the marginal revenue curve, that particular point is actually called the equilibrium point in case of the industry curve, which stands for C. And the price level is always remains the constant, which are drawn on the vertical line which reaches to the industry where the prices remains fixed, and when the prices remains fixed, the quantity will not be changed at all, where the price and cost will remain equal, and which is in the horizontal line which has been shown in the firm A, firm B, and of course for the industry as well. So when both the firms togetherly decide the prices or increase the prices or cost, if they have sustained and constant the price and cost, then ultimately it will be followed in the industry as well. And as a result, the P would be the price level under the cartel model, and the quantity will remains the fixed as there is no changes in the quantities in case of the industry, which is stands for original quantity, that is OQ, and the price and the cost will remains the same, that is OP and OC, where the E is the equilibrium point where the marginal cost intersects the marginal revenue, and that point is the equilibrium point where the industry can reach out at the maximum level where the quantity stands for OQ and the price stands for OP. And that is the case of the industry where the combination of the two firms were engaged into a formal agreement, and accordingly the industry curve has been drawn, which has been shown on the slides as well. So this is a way that how the cartel is working in a particular industry when the two or more firms who are engaged together into a formal agreement to with the main purpose to limit the production or sustain or increase the prices, and accordingly they will work together. So this is a case of the working of a cartel where the two firms and with the use of the two firms, with the use of the cost curves and the revenues, and of course the price level, the industry curve has been drawn, which has been shown over here in this particular slide. So the average revenue and the marginal revenue is automatically, it's downward sloping, which automatically begins from the y-axis, and the price and cost will remains the constant as these particular parameters always constant with the in the two firms, and accordingly it also be carry forward in the industry at a constant level. So this is a way that how the cartel is working for a particular firms. So this is an explanation of this particular diagram. In this figure, as I already told, that average revenue is equal to the demand curve for both the organizations, that is firm A and firm B. And marginal cost curve, it's always a combination of two cost curves, that is MC1 and MC2, and A and B respectively. So the total output which is determined is according to the marginal revenue and the marginal cost, which I already already told that industries totally depends on the two curves only, that is marginal revenue and the marginal cost, because they intersect at that point, which is called the equilibrium point. So in this particular industry, the OQ and OP are the equilibrium price and the output. So when we go further to the explanation of this diagram, we can talk about the output which has been distributed between the two firms, that is OQ1 and the OQ2, where the cost and the price will be shown at the horizontal line from an equilibrium point, that is E of that industry, towards where the MC cuts intersect to the cost curves automatically. And for the firms, if we talk about the firms A or organization A and B, the equilibrium points would be the interaction of E1 and E2, which automatically the equilibrium points of A and B, which I already told that C1 and C2. If you look up the diagram, that the C1 and the C2 are actually a combination through which the equilibrium point has been derived in the particular curve, that is for the industrial curve. Whereas the OQ1 is the equilibrium point for the E, and OQ2 is the equilibrium point for output. It's an equilibrium output for organization B, and as a result, when we combine these two, you can say output, the ultimately for the industry it reached the combination of two outputs, that is OQ, and this output shows a maximum profits where the industry earns the maximum profits of all the members organization who actually involved. So whatever the profits has been earned by the industry, that will be shared between the two organizations on the sharing basis accordingly, which has been mentioned in the formal agreement. So this is how the cartel would work between or among the members organization or a competing organization for a particular business. Now we come up to the most important concept, that is the prisoner dilemma. So when we talk about the prisoner dilemma is always refers to take up a optimal decision making and follow a game theory, which always states that or specify that how the two rational individuals trap or come up into a same situation, and accordingly they have to respond without knowing what would be the actions on the same situation. These two individuals has to take care of their self interest, or what if they refuse to cooperate in a particular scenario, in a particular you can say situation, and ultimately leads to an optimal outcome, or it could be a suboptimal outcome, or it could be a non-optimal outcome. So in this particular dilemma, is there are two main individuals who are playing a game or trapped in a situation where both has to cooperate, or if they don't cooperate, and ultimately the non-optimal outcome or suboptimal outcome would come if they cooperate. There would be suboptimal outcome if they don't cooperate to each other. Then it would be a non-optimal output. It could be leads to punishment, or it could be leads to penalty. So these two firms, these two individuals have to take care of their self-interest, or if they cannot, they can refuse to cooperate to each other in a particular situation and condition. And that is that paradox to in case of decision making, in coming up to a modern games theories, that actually called the prisoner dilemma. It always allows that whoever the two individuals involved in a situation, involved in a game, they must know that how to cooperate and how there would be a possibility to cooperate to each other if they have to take up an optimum decision making, or any strategic decision making is actually on their way. So whether it would be a game or any real life scenario, this dilemma is always helps to analyze what would be the possible outcomes of a particular problem and what would be the best decisions to come out of it between the two individuals in a particular real life or a game situation. So if you play any of the games, so there are two chances or two possibilities would be there either to win or to lose. So if you win, that means the best decision or a best outcome from best outcome would come out that you have been due to follow up strategies strategic decisions making. On the other hand, if you lose out that game, it means it would become a non-optimal outcome, or rather than you can say it would be a non-strategic decision making would be taken wherever the particular individual would lose that game. So whenever there is a real life situation or any of the games, the two individuals is always trapped into that game, and they have to take care of their self-interest. They have to cooperate towards each other so that whatever the problem involved or facing by these two individuals, collectively they can take up the best decisions so that they can come out with some positive results. So that for that particular perspective, this conceptual framework is always applicable in different specialization, in different niches, marketing specializations like business, economics, finance, sociology. You can talk about the management and so on. So there's various specialization where this particular concept will be adopted in that particular situation, whether it's related to the games or whether it's related to a real life scenario. This is how the prisoner dilemma works. So there is a situation which has been given to the individual or the entity, and accordingly, they both will take up a strategic decision making. So what would be the strategic decision making would be either they will act for their own self-interest, they can think about their own self and take accordingly the decisions, or either they refuse to cooperate. And we are the two firms involved, we don't want to cooperate each other and we just refuse to cooperate, and as a result what would be the results would be it would be the suboptimal outcome, or their if they act for their self-interest that I can take safety of my own self and just ignore the other one, that would considered as a suboptimal outcome. If they refuse to cooperate to each other or to help out to the others, then ultimately it leads to a non-optimal outcome. So there is a situation, a scenario has been given. There are two individuals or two organizations are involved. Accordingly, they have to make up or prepare in a strategic decision making according to the situation. And what would be the decision? Either they refuse to accept whatever the scenario would be, or they both act in the same situation for their self-interest, for their own sake, for their own care. And ultimately, what would be the outcome? Either it would be the suboptimal outcome or the non-optimal outcome. So when we talk about this theory, it always describe a particular situation where the two participants are always involved, whether they will cooperate or not. So ultimately, whatever their decisions making process will reach out to the optimum solution, which has been shown in this particular diagram at the earlier slide. So cooperation is very much important because they will help their decisions together for the welfare of their own interest, whether for the case of the particular individual or business or economic, and as well as for the society also. But these parties, if they cannot communicate, if they cannot cooperate about the situation, and they just think of their self-interest rather than cooperating to protect themselves, as a result, it could be a worse outcome, or it could be a, you can say, non or sub optimal outcome, where which automatically influence the both parties, influence the both participants. So such kind of approach will always takes place when both the individual will not able to understand that the cooperation is a tool where all the problems could be solved. So accordingly, the decisions could be made for their best interest. So if automatically they don't cooperate, or the worst outcome occurs because of non-cooperation, because of communication gap between these two organizations, and accordingly the worst outcome would exist in that particular businesses. So this concept is basically developed by mathematicians, which the namely called the Merlin Flood and the Melvin Dresser developed the first prisoner dilemma, which came in 1950 while working at the Rent Corporation. However, the Albert Williams Tucker, who is a Canadian mathematician, gave this paradox, this particular the scenario, the situation which relate to the game's perspective. That is, its name has been derived, which has been given by the Albert Williams Tucker, who is the Canadian mathematicians after 1950. So this is a classical concept of the, or you can say, or we can talk about the classical theory of the prisoner dilemma situation. So let's just a brief over it. So consider there is a situation scenario, or the situation which where the two criminal suspect, that is A and B, they are apprehended by the police, they have captured by the police and placed in a two different rooms or cell. The police or the cops always finding it hard to obtain the confession whether the crime has been done by A or B or both. So they are trying to trick them for both whether deeds. So they ask them to confess or to blame the other partner, or cooperate to both to save themselves. So there are there are basically two confessions, two options has been given, that to confess the crime, or to blame the other partner, or to cooperate to save themselves. So in such situation, there are four possible outcomes which has been given over here. Either both A and B confess or defect, they just confess the crime, or they just say we are not actually involved in the crime. So automatically they will get 2 years in prison each. If A blames B, then A is released, while B gets a 3 years in prison. So if the B blames A, then A is subject, or you can say gets a 3 years jail term, while B is set free. If both cooperate, A and B, and remain silent, so both will get a 1 year in prison on a lesser charge. So these are the possible outcomes if the two main suspects involved, and they are trying or trick them both with a deal, and these are the deals, whether confess, whether defect, or whether blame the other partner or cooperate. If they cooperate themselves to each other, they will get 1 year in prison. If both will confess, then they will get 2 years in prison. If A blames B or B blames A, the both will get each, that is 3 years jail term. So this is a classical situation of the prisoner dilemma, where the two criminals involved, and how the cops trying to make up a deal and ask them to various options, which has been explained in this particular slide. Now, this is a scenario where the prisoner dilemma is also adopted in the business as well. So let's begin one of the good example. Let's say tea and the coffee are the two beverage companies who are competing in the same local element. So these two companies are the rivals in the same local market. To make sure that the one remains ahead of the other, they try to figure out the ways that how they can both improve their sales, because the sales of these two companies are automatically down or they are not well performing. So both are trying to figure out what would be the ways that so that their sales could be improved. Then ultimately they have applied the prisoner dilemma paradox concept or framework to decide whether they would invest in an investments or not, or it would be a worthwhile for both of the companies. So this is how the situation has been given when there is a problem, that the sales is not working well, how to improve the sales, and if they invest more in the investment, so the sales would get increased or not, or it would be a worthwhile decision or not. So in this particular scenario, a real life scenario or a business scenario, how the prisoner dilemma could work. So let's go on through. Let's read about it. So these are the possible outcomes. So keeping into a mind the above consideration, which has been a case which has been shown that their sales are not working, how to increase the sales, is the advertisements or investments in advertisement could be the best choice or could be a best option for both the companies. So considering these situation, the particular possible outcomes could be if both beverage companies advertise their products, then the customers would be split between both the brands. 50-50 proportion would be there, and the advertising cost deducted separately, and then whatever the revenues would be generated, it should be equal. So this is a first possibility. A possible result would come out if the particular board companies have decided to invest in advertisements for their product. In that particular scenario, the customers, 50% customer would go to the tea beverage and 50% customer would go to the coffee beverage. So whatever the advertising cost and whatever the revenues would be generated, the advertising cost would be deducted separately, and whatever the revenues would be on, it should be shared equally. So this is the first outcome. When we talk about the second outcome, where the team would advertise, would invest into an advertisement, and the COF will not cooperate, will not invest in any of the advertisement for their products. So what would be the result of the advertisement? That 80% of the population would buy the product of the tea beverage company, and they will generate the company will generate the more and more profits, and whatever the profits they will earn, whatever the advertising cost has been incurred, it would be deducted from the revenue of the tea beverage company, because the coffee beverage company will not willing to cooperate to invest into an advertisements for their products. So this is the second possibility would be as according to the situation and the real life business scenario. In the third possibility, if the COF advertise or invest in advertisement and the tea beverage company will not invest, will not cooperate, then what would be the result of that? That 80% of the population will buy a COF product, and whatever the revenue has been generated, and the advertisement cost will be deducted from that particular profit of the COF, you can say beverage company. So there are three possibilities where the both will advertise, then 50-50% customers will buy the both brands. If tea advertise and cough will not, then 80% population will buy tea brands. If the cough advertise and tea will not, then 80% of the population will buy the cough products or brands, and whatever the revenue will be earned, accordingly the advertising cost will be deducted from it. Same the third, and this is a third scenario, but when we come up to the fourth possibility, when both have decided that they will not advertise, then the 50% of the population will go on the tea beverage, and 50% population will go on the cough beverage, and accordingly the equal distribution, that means 50-50 revenue will be equally generated between the two firms. So these are the four main possibilities according to the situation which has been prescribed in the earlier slide, and as this is actually called the prisoner dilemma conceptual framework has been followed, because we are talking about the possible outcomes, we are talking about the possibilities. What would be the possibilities could be when a particular real life scenario, a particular business scenario has been given. So based on these possibilities, this is a particular diagram which has been shown over here, that is tea and cough prisoner dilemma. So these are the two main concepts, that is tea and coffee. Tea has been shown on the you can say horizontal or a row side, and the cough bases are shown on the column or vertical side. So when we talk about the tea does not advertise or operate, and the tea decided to advertise, whereas the COF has decided does not advertise or cooperate, and ultimately the second option that the base has been given by the COF is the company, the COF will advertise. So what would be the option? These are the four options which has been shown in this particular table. If the T does not advertise or does not cooperate, and the COF does not advertise and cooperate, that what would be the outcome, optimum outcome? That means the 50% population will go on for the T, 50% population will go on the COF. So whatever the revenues earned between them will be equal, and accordingly the advertising cost would be deducted from it. So if the T would like to advertise and the COF will not willing to advertise, then 80% population will prefer T, and whatever the profits will earn, advertising cost will be deducted from it. So this is how the prisoner dilemma work in the real businesses, T and COF. These are the real, you can see, brands of the US. So accordingly, it will be work in this particular model. So when we talk about that the T does not advertise and the COF will advertise or make an investment in advertising, so what would be the outcome? That means if the T does not advertise and the COF, that means 80% population will refer the COF brands, and whatever the revenues generated, they will just advertising cost will be deducted from it. So the another fourth possibility is T is also willing to advertise, COF is also willing to advertise. That means 50-50 population will be divided, and 50-50% population will prefer T and COF. So whatever the profit generated by both, it would be distributed equally, and accordingly the advertising cost will be equally distributed and deducted from the revenue which has been generated and shared by both the companies. So this is how the business dilemma work in case of the two companies in the real life businesses. Now the next is how to avoid this model, how to avoid this prisoner dilemma model. So these are the three main reasons to introduce the incentives, to introduce such incentive options for all those competing participants to make an optimal outcome which are beneficial for each of them. We always cooperate to think about the welfare of the society, the welfare of the business, the welfare of the economy as well. So this is a way that when the particular incentives will be given to the participants, to the competitive organizations to make an optimal solutions which are beneficial for all, then prisoner dilemma model will not be applicable. The second reason is allow the participants to interact, to more and more communicate, which automatically influence the each other decisions making. So when they are willing to more and more communicate, they are willing to fill up the communication gap. They are willing to influence the each other decisions of the business situations or the business issues and concern, then ultimately the prisoner dilemma conceptual or the model will not be accepted, will not be adopted in case of the interaction, in case of the influence of each other decision making. The next reason is choosing cooperation over defection. When both farms will cooperate each other, that means the prisoner dilemma will not be adopted. If they defect, if the two or more organization will defect, then the prisoner dilemma concept will be there. So to avoid such model, then to choose the cooperation word that cooperate whatever the decisions, whatever the issues would be there, just cooperatively work in a team and just find out the optimum solution so that that particular problem would be resolved immediately. So these are the three main situations where the prisoner dilemma will be avoided and will not be adopted in such particular cases. So the next, there are few reasons or the explanation of these particular points. So if the incentives are to be given so that it will be beneficial for all those individuals who are basically involved in the decision making. It is always good to establish the communication in the real life scenarios where all the participants, whether it would be two, it would be three, they always get an opportunity to interact, or of course they will automatically impact the each other decisions related to the businesses. The third one explanation is cooperative. Being cooperative is one of the best solution which always give us a best results rather than go for the defection which always leads to a minimum impact. So this is the whole scenario where the prisoner dilemma will concept will be avoided. Now we talk about the next important concept, that is the individual firm equilibrium in the long run under monopolistic competitions. So when we talk about the individual firm equilibrium in the long run, so as you are well aware that in the long run, the average revenue curve is more elastic than the in the short run. Why? Because of the increase in the number of substitute products or substitute goods. So when there is an increase in the number of substitute goods or products in the long run, then automatically the average revenue curve is more elastic in the long run, and ultimately the long run equilibrium point will be achieved when average revenue is equal to average cost, which ultimately leads to the normal profit. That means the firms will receive the normal profits in the a long period under the monopolistic competition. So whatever the equilibrium situation would be, it could be achieved by the individual firms when the average revenue is equal to the average cost. So which leads to normal profit. So let's to understand through graphical representation. So let's begin with that. So this is the diagram of the graphical representation of the individual firm equilibrium in the long run under the monopolistic competition. So if you look at the figure where the average curve is almost the more elastic than in the short period. So why? Because they are more, average revenue is more elastic because of the increased number of the substitute goods in the long run. And when there is a situation like this, then the firm will achieve the equilibrium point or will achieve the normal profits when the average revenue is equal to the average cost. So in this particular case, where the P is a point where the average revenue touches the long run average cost curve, which is a which in other words in economics we say see the tangent towards the both the curves, that is average revenue and the long run average cost, where the P is an equilibrium point where the average revenue is equal to the average cost, and where these two points intersect or tangent to each other, that point is called the equilibrium point or the max or the normal profit situation, where the output refers to a OM and the prices refers to a OP dash. So in this present case scenario, the average cost is equal to the average revenue, and which refers to a point that is MP. So in the long run, the profits are normal, and in the short, if we take a case of the short period, the equilibrium is attained when the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. So in the long run, the average revenue is equal to the average cost. But in case of the long run period or in the long run, the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. That means where the marginal revenue cuts the marginal cost, that point is called the equilibrium point in the case of short run period. As this is a case of the long run period, is the condition has been achieved when the average revenue touches or cuts the marginal average cost, where the profits are normal. So it means in the long run, both the conditions, whether it would be marginal revenues equal to marginal cost or the average revenues equal to average cost, must hold to achieve the equilibrium. So that means the average revenue equal to average cost is already achieved in the particular diagram, where the profits are normal in case of individual firm equilibrium in the long run under the monopolistic market. Now we can talk about rather than individual firm, we talk about the group equilibrium in the long run under monopolistic competitions. So this is the exact conceptual framework. This particular concept, the concept of the group equilibrium, was introduced by the Chamberlain. Chamberlain is one of the most, you can say, great economists who have developed this concept, and where the price and output equilibrium of all the firms, because if we are talking about the group equilibrium, that means we are talking about the multiple firms where the price and output equilibrium has been achieved, that actually called the group equilibrium. So group equilibrium always refers the price and output of the firms which having a close substitutes or close substitute of products or goods. So when we talk about when there is a product differentiation, so it is very difficult to form the market demand schedules and as well as the supply. So when we determine the price and output, there is a rule of demand and supply when the products are close substitutes. When there is a product differentiation, then there is a very difficult situation where to develop or to form or construct the market demand schedules as well as the supply particular market. When we talk about the automobile industries, makers of cars and trucks, who always are the two different product groups, and the main competition is always the manufacturing process, always the manufacturing in numbers. And the both are very similar products which are very close substitutes to each other. So in this particular scenario, if there is a product differentiation, that means there are huge variations or huge changes in the demand and the cost curves of the firm, and ultimately the prices and the output and the products will also be different in this particular scenario. So the two products were having a close substitutes. That means their demand and cost curves would also be different, huge changes in their curves, and automatically when there is huge changes, the price and output and the profit will also become different in that particular scenario for those products which having a close substitutes. So that is called the group equilibrium in monopolistic competition. Now we talk about the assumption over here. So these are the assumptions where the demand and the cost curves of all the products in the group are the same, are the uniform. So whatever the preferences of the consumer are automatically distributed, and whatever the difference involved in it, it does not influence any changes in the cost. So this is the assumption of the group equilibrium. But in case of second assumption is when in case of monopolistic competition, a large number of sellers are not able to influence each other's decisions. But when we talk about this particular concept, whatever the changes is involved on the prices or level, the firm will not have any influence on its customers as well. And that's why such assumption is called symmetric assumption. So to conclude these two assumptions, whether the preference of the consumers will not influence the cost or will not make any changes in the cost, whatever the number of sellers involved in such competition, they do not involve any other decisions, even if there is a changes in the prices or the level of output, no influence on the its competitors as well. So this is an assumption which has been made, but ultimately the real scenario, the assumption will be followed, and what would be the outcome, that is very interesting to see about it. So let's begin with the graphical representation of this particular diagram. So this is a diagram which has been shown because the group equilibrium in the short run is also exists. The group equilibrium in the long run will also exist. So right at this moment, I'm trying to show up the group equilibrium in the short run. In the next slide, the equilibrium in the short run will be also shown in the upcoming slide. So here we can talk about the group equilibrium in the short run, where as you can see the two main curves, that is short run marginal cost and the short run average cost has been drawn, and it always where the marginal revenue and the marginal cost curves, it automatically cuts to each other along with the short run average cost as well. So when we talk about P is the equilibrium point where where the marginal cost and average cost are automatically intersect to each other, and that particular interaction point would be called the original output and original equilibrium point, which stands a T, and automatically there would be a vertical line drawn where these two curves short run average cost curve and the short run marginal cost curve intersect each other, draw a vertical line, and just mark the points, that is P and T. T is an equilibrium point, so when you go forward, there would be a P another point, and when it goes down, that vertical line where the begin, where the line has been drawn, that is M. M stands for the, or OM stand for the original output where the firms has produced this particular output, that is OM. So if you look up that P is a when we talk about P is a equilibrium point where the output is OM, price is PM, and the average cost when we talk about the MT. Why we talk about average cost MT? Because average cost is cuts the marginal cost, and that's why there is another point involved, that is TM. So the cost is TM, output is PM, price is MP or PM, and automatically output is OMT. MT is a, you can say, average cost, and PM is a price level. So in such case, the marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue. Why I are told why it is equal? Because the marginal cost cuts the marginal revenue, and that point, at that particular point where they both cuts, that means it achieved the equilibrium, another equilibrium point, but in the short run where the marginal revenues equals to the marginal cost, and ultimately when they cuts towards each other where the average cost cuts, ultimately there is a situation in the long run when the firms are earning super normal profits, that is in the form of the box which has been drawn, that is P dash, P, T, and T dash. So this the whole area we call a super normal profits, and these super normal profits will not be available in the long run. That's why I said in the short run the firm can achieve super normal profits, but in the long run super normal profits cannot be achieved. So this is how the equilibrium point will be achieved in the short run. So this is the way that how the firms would achieve in the form of graphical representation. Now we talk about, you can say, the below equilibrium or the equilibrium in the long run. So if we talk about in the long run, the supernormal profits will not be achieved only only in the long run, all the firms will achieve the normal profit. So if you look at the diagram where the long run average cost curve and average revenue, it intersects to each other. And ultimately, P is called the equilibrium point and OM is called the original output produced by all the firms, and OP dash, we talk about the cost curve or the price level. So it can be seen that supernormal profits is not available or disappears in case of long run, and it also shows that the average revenue is tangent to the a long run average cost curve. It means that the average revenue is equal to price automatically. So marginal, in this particular case, we can also see that the marginal revenue is also equal to the marginal cost at the original output, that is called OM. And you can see why, because the OM, the output line, it automatically cuts the interaction point where the MR is equal to the marginal cost. So this shows in the long run how the all firms is in the industries are making up or earning the normal profits. This is the equilibrium with selling cost concept, that how the selling cost is involved to achieve the equilibrium point. So the selling costs are the cost which automatically shape ups, or you can say give a position of the demand curve for the particular product. So according to the Chamberlain, who is one of the famous economists, he defined the selling cost plays a very important role in monopolistic competition and oligopoly. So under these all firms are always come forward to compete, to promote their own sales of its own product by investing or making up the investments on advertisements and the publicity. So if they want it, if they invest something on the particular promotional activities, accordingly their selling cost would always involve, and through the selling cost, through the selling cost, if the sales would get increased, then automatically these costs would be cut off from the revenues or the profits which has been earned by all the firms. So automatically advertisement cost, publicity cost, any salesmanship cost, which always add to the supply curve of the, you can say, product, it, or then automatically when these costs involved or included in the supply curve of the product will ultimately contribute or to rise a demand for such products. And that's why selling cost is a broader concept in the advertising expenditure, because advertising expenditure are the part of the selling cost. So that's it for today. Thank you for listening this particular lecture. Until time, I'll always come up to the most and most relevant and the important topics related to this particular blog. Thank you to all and namaste to all.